Women in rock. Overview. Overview. In popular music, there has been a gendered distinction between public male and private female participation in music. Several scholars have argued that men exclude women from bands or from the band's rehearsals, recordings, performances, and other social activities. Women are mainly regarded as passive and private consumers of allegedly slick prefabricated. One of the reasons that there are rarely mixed-gender bands is that bands operate as tight-knit units in which homosocial solidarity, social bonds between people of the same sex, plays a crucial role. In the 1960s pop music scene, singing was sometimes an acceptable pastime for a girl, but playing an instrument simply wasn't done. The rebellion of rock music was largely a male rebellion, the women often, in the 1950s and 60s, girls in their teens in rock usually sang songs as persony utterly dependent on their man. In relation to the gender composition of heavy metal bands, it has been said that heavy metal performers are almost exclusively male, at least until the mid-1980s apart from. However, now in the 2010s, maybe more than ever, strong metal women have put up their dukes and got down to it, carving out a considerable place for themselves. When Suzi Quatro emerged in 1973, no other prominent female musician worked in rock simultaneously as a singer, instrumentalist, songwriter, and bandleader. According to Auslander, she was kicking down the male door in rock and roll and proving that a female musician, and this is a point I am extremely concerned about, could play as well if not better than the boys. A number of these artists are also notable for singing and songwriting, but they are listed here for their instrumental skills. Joni Mitchell, Bonnie Raitt, Nancy Wilson of Heart, Kaki King, Orianthe, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Jennifer Batten, Mary Ford, Lita Ford, Joan Jett, Janet Gardner of Vixen, Kim McAuliffe of Girl School, Carla Olson of the Textones, also a guitar player, songwriter, and producer. All-female bands and girl groups. An all-female band is a musical group in popular music genres such as rock, blues, jazz, and related genres which is exclusively composed of female musicians. This is distinct from a girl group, in which the female members are solely vocalists, though this terminology is not universally followed. While all-male bands are common in many rock and pop bands, all-female bands are less common. A girl group is a music act featuring several female singers who generally harmonize their vocals together. The term girl group is also used in a narrower sense within English-speaking countries. All female bands are sometimes also called girl groups. 1930s, 1960s. In the Jazz Age and during the 1930s, all female bands such as the Bluebells, the Parisian Redheads, later the Bricktops, Lil Hardin's all-girl band, the Ingenues, the Harlem Playgirls, Phil Spitalny's musical Sweethearts, and Helen Louise and her all-girl jazz syncopators were popular. Ina Ray Hutton led an all-girl band, the Melodars, from 1934 to 1939. Eunice Westmoreland, under the name Rita Rio, led an all-female band appearing on NBC Radio and for Vitaphone and RKO. Ivy Benson's all-girls band was the BBC resident dance band in 1943 and toured. A Polish group, Filipinki, was established in 1959. Groups composed solely of women began to emerge with the advent of rock and roll. Among the earliest all-female rock bands to be signed to a record label were Goldie and the Gingerbreads, to Atlantic Records in 1964, the Pleasure Seekers with Suzi Quatro to Hideout Records in 1964 and Mercury Records in 1968. There is also a band formed with four girls from Indonesia, Dara Puspita formed The Feminine Complex to Athena Records in 1968, and Fanny, who pioneered the all-female band sound in the early to mid-1970s in 1969, when Mo Austin signed them to Warner Bros. Records. There were also others, such as the Liverbirds 1962-1967, the Ace of Cups 1967, the Heartbeats 1968, and Ariel 1968-1970. 1970s, 1980s. In 1971, Fanny became the first all-female band. In 1975, the Runaways were an early commercially successful, hard-edged, all-female hard rock band, releasing their first album in 1976. Band members Joan Jett, Cherie Currie, and Lita Ford all went on to solo careers. The 1980s, for the first time, saw long-sought chart success from all-female bands and female-fronted rock bands. On the Billboard Hot 100 Year End chart for 1982, Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll at number 3, and the Go-Go's We Got the Beat at number 25 sent a message out to many industry heads that females who could play could bring in money. Punk. In the United Kingdom, the advent of punk in the late 1970s, with its anyone can do it ethos, led to women making significant contributions. In contrast to the rock music and heavy metal scenes of the 1970s, which were dominated by men, the anarchic, countercultural mindset of the punk scene in mid and late 1970s encouraged women to participate. That was the beauty of the punk thing, Chrissy Hind later said. Sexual discrimination didn't exist in that scene. This participation played a role in the historical development of punk music, especially in the US and UK at that time, and continues to influence and enable future generations. Rock historian Helen Reddington states that the popular image of young punk women musicians is focused on the fashion aspects of the scene. Fishnet stockings, spiky blonde hair, etc. was stereotypical. She states that many, if not most, women punks were more interested in the ideology and socio-political implications rather than the fashion. Music historian Caroline Kuhn contends that before punk, women in rock music were virtually invisible. In contrast, in punk, she argues it would be possible to write the whole history of punk music without mentioning any male bands at all, and I think a lot of people would find that very surprising. Johnny Rotten wrote that during the Pistols era, women were out there playing with the men, taking us on in equal terms. It wasn't combative, but compatible. Women were involved in bands such as the Slits, the Raincoats, Modestes, Dolly Mixture, and the Innocents. Others take issue with the notion of equal recognition, such as guitarist Vive Albertine, who stated that the and are men. The bouncers, the sound mixers, no one took us seriously. So no, we got no respect anywhere we went. People just didn't want us around. The anti-establishment stance of punk opened the space for women who were treated like outsiders in a male-dominated industry. Sonic Youth's Kim Gordon states, I think women are natural anarchists because you're always operating in a male framework. Heavy metal. The all-female heavy metal band Girl School, from South London, formed in 1978 out of the ashes of Painted Lady. While somewhat successful in the UK, they became better known in the early 1980s. One of the original members of the band, Kathy Valentine, departed to join the all-female band The Go-Go's, switching from guitar to bass. Among Girl School's early recordings was an EP titled The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which they recorded with Bronze label mates Motorhead under the name Headgirl. In 1974, the Deadly Nightshade, a rock/country band, was signed by Phantom. 1990s, 2000s. In the 1990s, musicians' magazines were starting to view female musicians more seriously, putting Bonnie Raitt and Tina Weymouth on their covers. While the Go-Go's and the Bangles, both from the La Club scene, were the first all-female rock bands to find sustained success, individual musicians paved the way for the industry to seek out bands that had female musicians. In the 1990s, bands such as Whole Babes in Toyland, superheroines, the Love Dolls and L7 became popular, while demonstrating on stage and in interviews a self-confident and bad attitude at times, always willing to challenge assumptions about how an all-female band should behave. Courtney Love described the other females in Hole as using a more lunar viewpoint in their roles as musicians. In the 1990s, the punk, female-led riot girl genre was associated with bands such as Bratmobile and Bikini Kill. References equals